Welcome to SF Nonprofit Spotlight, brought to you by SF Commons. I'm Kelly Daly. When you look at race, ethnicity, and pregnancy in America, the health outcomes couldn't be more disturbing or different. Americans die in childbirth at some of the highest rates of any developed nation. And when you look in particular at Black women, they die during childbirth at a rate 3 times higher than white women. But there's a San Francisco organization that's working to improve maternal health and infant mortality rates. For 2 years, SisterWeb has connected pregnant Blacks, Latinx, and Pacific Islanders with culturally compatible companions called doulas. They help empower parents to be with giving them resources and support that they need for a healthy, dignified birth journey. And joining me today is someone who is leading the programs at SisterWeb, the director of programs, Marley I. Mystic. Hi, Marley I.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to speak about one of my passions, which is doula support and caring for families here in San Francisco.
That sounds terrific. And just so that everyone is on the same page about what a doula is, can you maybe tell us about some of the origins, backgrounds, and how you came to learn about doulas?
Most definitely. So doulas currently provide education, information, physical and emotional support to birthing families and parents-to-be, but it is a tradition that is as old as birthing itself. There's always been people there who were to support the families, preparing them for the birth, helping them get ready for the labor, and to be there in person to support. And historically, this was a woman. This was someone who worked closely with the midwives or those who had the knowledge to bring forth life. And they usually were noticed in their youth that they had a spark or some type of inclination towards this work. And it was taught in a community way, in an apprentice type way. And as we have progressed and become super cultured and went medical, doula work became more official. Many people would say that they were doulas and supported work, but didn't know about the actual word or the profession. It is a Greek word and it sounds a little strange to some, but it's work that is very ancient. And I believe that it's being elevated now because of those disparities that you've listed previously and the fact that continuous support has been shown in research to change those outcomes.
You know, Marley, you mentioned someone showing a spark for birth work, even as a child. Maybe can you talk about your experience with being a doula and being attracted to this work?
Most definitely. It was always a spark in me. I grew up in a community and had several older brothers and sisters. And right around the age of 12, my siblings began to reproduce and bring forth these lovely little lives that I was so excited to be a part of. And watching that journey of my sisters and sister-in-laws as they developed from, seemed like from nothing, from thin air to bringing forth this life was amazing to me. And I had the opportunity to attend a couple of births at that young age of 12. And it really set me on a path of saying, wow, this is amazing. I want to be in tune and in communion with this energy of life that comes around when babies are born. And for a long time, I thought that meant that I wanted to be a pediatrician or some type of doctor. But really, it was that I wanted to be there to support the families during the birth and not provide that medical care, but provide that support to help normalize the whole process and to help really instill a sense of trust of their own bodies and of their providers as they went through this journey. So it took a while for me to even realize that I wanted to be a doula. I went to school and thought I was going to work in nonprofits and do all of this, and really decided after I had my second child in a home birth with the assistance of a doula, that this was work that I could really get into. And my doula for that birth actually connected me with the training and was like, hey, You are already a doula. You've been supporting people since you were a child. You should go ahead and get trained and do this work. And I was fortunate to be trained with midwives. So it takes me back to that old tradition of being able to work with the ones who are doing all the medical support for the patients and for the clients, and to get that understanding of how we work as a team to support that birthing family and that person. And I got certified in 2012 and have had the opportunity to help family, friends, and folks who just found me on the internet. And when I came into SisterWeb, it was the first time that this profession was legitimized for me, that it wasn't me being an entrepreneur or me trying to have a side job or a gig to, bring in some extra money, but the fact that I could be employed to do this work, that it was actually, a legitimate and a fundamental career path. And SisterWeb has opened that up for myself and so many more doulas.
And speaking of finances, hiring a doula can be really costly for some people, but SisterWeb provides services for free. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit about what you're hearing from clients about how they benefit from this service.
Most definitely. I think that is one big point, is that when you hear about doulas, you often think that it is for the privileged, that this is something that only, a certain demographic can afford, and it's going to look a certain way. And that's one of the reasons why SisterWeb is so remarkable in the way that we provide care, because we provide it for free to those who are really in the most need. The reason that we serve the Latinx and Pacific Islander and Black communities here in San Francisco is because those are the three ethnic groups that have the biggest disparities in our city. And so to be able to provide that for them has changed the birth experience. We are able to not only be there to support them in birth and prepare, but also help them engage with their providers. And with the history of this country and the medical field, we often see fear, ambivalence, a lack of self-confidence when people are going to receive support. And with their doulas there, they feel more confident. They're able to advocate for themselves and to also ask the questions that they may not have wanted to bring up. So we've heard clients say that they felt more respected in their births, that they don't know how they could have done it without their doula, that at first they weren't sure that they needed somebody else in the room to be there with them because they've had children before, they've had family members who've had experience. So what is a doula going to do for me? But after having that, they understood that the perspective and the experience that doulas have really open up a world for them where they have more control and say over their body and over their experience of birth. So it's really just, I like to compare it to like a life coach, in the sense that you have someone there who's going to help you ask the right questions, who's going to help you get to the goal that you set, not one that is set for you. And oftentimes when families are going through the pregnancy journey, they get things set upon them or foisted upon them. And your doula is really there to help you have the experience. We're non-judgmental. We don't have an agenda. We are here to help you have the experience that is going to make you feel the most respected and empowered in your birth.
You know, Marley, I'm talking to you on a day where San Francisco is loosening restrictions, right? The COVID restrictions where we couldn't go inside. There were so many requirements. I know that in-person services versus virtual probably was a big discussion for SisterWeb. Can you maybe tell us how the pandemic has impacted the organization?
Yes, we are coming up right on a year of everything shutting down and the change coming in the way that we practice. And SisterWeb's model of care is very hands-on, very personable, because we notice that with medical care during pregnancy, you often see different providers. There's no continuity of care. And even when you do see the same provider, when you go in for a birth, it may not be the provider who you're comfortable with. And we know that opening the cervix is a sphincter. You have to be able to relax to a certain extent in order to open. And so we were very consistent on providing in-person support throughout the whole journey. Clients can get matched as early as 10 weeks and begin to build their relationship with their doulas. And what this looked like for us is coming to their home, doing 2-hour visits, getting to know them as a person, their fears, their desires, their past experiences, and really building a trusting relationship with them. So when COVID started coming to the Bay Area and the hospital said one support person only, many of our clients had to decide if they were going to bring their partners or their family members or loved ones, or if they were going to bring their doulas. And us as an organization had to decide what is safe for our doulas. How do we safely bring them there to support? Because no doula wanted to leave their client alone in the hospital without their support. We had prepared for it. And I think the roughest time was March last year, when we had clients who had been with us for a significant amount of time, and we immediately had to shift to say, hey, we're only going to be able to support you with text messages or phone calls or video chats. And a lot of the hospitals don't even have good reception on all their floors. So it was a real challenge for us. But thankfully, SisterWeb has an initiative called the Champion Dyad Initiative, where we have close partnerships with 5 out of the 6 birthing locations here in San Francisco. And we're able to do bi-directional feedback. So those relationships that had already been built allowed us to have those tough conversations with the hospitals to advocate for us, but to also advocate for the well-being of the doulas. Because it's one thing to say, okay, let the doulas in, but it's another thing to say, let them in and let them switch out. Let them be able to, leave if someone is COVID positive. So we had to switch things, and we found that our model of care required significant shifts in the amount of contact that we had, where we were able to do 3 prenatals previously and sit down and come to your home and, break bread and share. Now we might need to check on you weekly with a phone call or a text message. And so our emphasis was on, how do we create those bonds in a virtual world and prepare them enough to feel like they can advocate for themselves in the hospital? And what that looked like for a lot was miniature doula trainings for that support person, incorporating their team to say, hey, get on a video chat and let's go over those different positions for birth. Let's go over how you advocate for yourself, going over the benefits, the risks, the alternatives, and how you can talk and speak about that. And then we also had some support from the birthing locations to say, we have tablets here. You let us know when your client is coming in, and we can roll a tablet in there, and you can be on that video screen supporting your client just as you were in person. So it was a definite shift, and it took some time for us to get there, but we did notice that we had more contact, more relationships, and we noticed a greater need. A lot of our clients needed more than just the birth support. With COVID hitting, there were financial impacts, there were access to food. And so a lot of our resources went to finding and outsourcing places where we could make sure they had supplies, personal protective equipment, food and produce deliveries. And so our care really became more. And I think that's one of the beauty of this whole pandemic, is that it's a shock and things shifted, but there were so many opportunities to do things that change for the better and to provide more holistic care for our clients.
And another item that is really relevant to this period is that baby boom, right? Like, is it real? Has it really hit San Francisco?
It definitely has. People are spending more time with each other and having their bubbles. And so we've had a lot, upsurge, definitely come November. There were a lot more referrals. And unfortunately, we have a cap at our capacity. Our program can only provide support for as many doulas as we have. And so we've had more people on the wait list. We also saw an uptick in people wanting to do home births or out of hospital births, and being able to provide resources for them to say, here's a list of midwives you can contact and find that support. So we've seen a shift in not only the quantity, but also in the quality of care that people were getting. Because we have to remember, they also limited the prenatals, where only that birthing person could go in. You no longer could come with your partner or your friend or your loved one. They had to be on FaceTime. So it was a more lonely time for our pregnant moms. We noticed that a lot, that they were like, I have to do all this alone, or I may not even go into a office for a meeting. I'm doing a virtual meeting with my doctor, and them feeling like nobody is looking at me. My doula's not here, my doctor's not here. You know, where do I get that support? And so we've been able to just expand our care and our acknowledgement of how different things are, and to shift and personalize our care for each client.
In a time where healthcare access and equity are such concerns for so many people, Marley, I really appreciate hearing what you're doing to help pregnant people have a great, healthy birth. And I love the idea of supporting people with care and food and resources, even afterwards. That's so many people have stepped up, and to hear that SisterWeb is doing its part too. I really appreciate hearing details. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's been an honor.
Today is International Women's Day, and we are interviewing Linda Leu, who's the Executive Director and Trainer at Impact Bay Area. Impact has been serving the Bay Area for 25 years, offering self-defense classes and training. Thank you so much for being here, Linda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's just about the year anniversary of us being in a pandemic where many of us have been working from home or otherwise, not having a lot of in-person activities. And when I think people think of self-defense classes, they might think of very physical activities that are done in person, but you've been offering classes all the while virtually, and for some smaller groups. Tell us a little bit first about what you've been doing during the pandemic, and then we'll get more into the background of your organization.
Yeah, definitely. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, how are we going to be helpful and of service to our community in a time where people really need us? And we have never really thought about what we do as something that you could do online, but extraordinary times call for sometimes very hard pivots. So we have been offering online classes, and we have been offering kind of a lot of the things that we have done in person in the past, where we give folks the opportunity to learn some boundary setting tools and then practice them in as realistic as possible scenarios in the online platform. But we've also been really trying to create offerings that are helpful to people's immediate needs in this time. So we've been teaching sort of pandemic boundary setting skills, where suddenly there's this whole other thing that you need to ask people to respect your boundaries working in the home, and you need to negotiate boundaries with like people that you live with, and things that you're comfortable with strangers, like please stay 6 feet away from me. So we've been teaching pandemic boundary setting skills. We have been trying to be responsive to sort of the larger ongoing pandemic of racism and oppression, by offering classes that help people deal with anti-Asian harassment. We have been offering a course in interrupting oppression generally, that sort of is in tandem with our bystander course, that helps people say something or do something when they see somebody else being targeted for hate speech or violence. So we've been trying to offer also skills that help people manage the everyday stress of all the things that we're constantly now needing to renegotiate boundaries about. So we've been offering an adrenaline management and grounding class that takes skills that we normally teach in a self-defense setting, where people are very adrenalized and stressed. And, now that everybody sort of has that low hum of adrenaline in our everyday lives, we've been trying to offer those skills as sort of a standalone class as well.
So there's actually so much to be learned and to practice, and skills to pick up, even if we're not I think the example from when we talked is not, it was, the guy jumping out of the bushes that you have to fend off. So there's actually a lot more to it, which was really interesting for me to learn when we talked before. And we are talking, this episode is for Women's History Month, and Impact started out as an organization serving women in self-defense skills. And we are in the Bay Area, and it is modern times, and your offerings have actually grown and evolved to become much more nuanced than just women's self-defense classes. So can you talk a little bit about those nuances?
I mean, I think our sort of collective consciousness has evolved over time. Like, we used to talk about violence against women, and then we started talking about gender-based violence, because we recognized that, like, there are more dimensions to that. And then the more we learn and talk about intersectionality, we can also point to data that is emerging about, and about things that people that are part of certain communities have known the whole time, that, on top of being a woman, if you are a woman of color, if you are a trans woman of color, the kind of violence that you experience and harassment that you may experience in the world can be very different and or more intense than a cis straight white woman. So we have been trying to, as an organization, evolve the offerings that we have for the community, and we offer classes just for women of color in an affinity space. For that group, we offer an LGBTQ course, and we've been offering this anti-Asian harassment course for the AAPI community online. And so I think we've been trying to really look at who needs us in this community and who is being targeted for violence and harassment, and trying to sort of forward our anti-violence work through the most vulnerable populations.
Yeah. So very niche, very like targeted and intersectional offerings. That's great. So what was really interesting for me to learn is that, self-defense, again, we have this stereotype of just fending somebody off physically, and that you would, how do I get out of somebody hitting me or something?
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to learn in your words that your greatest weapon is your voice. And so for me now, I'm very interested in attending, and I hope to as well. Can you maybe paint a specific picture for anybody watching? So somebody's interested in taking one of these classes, and they don't have to come in person, it's not physical. What are some of the things that they might experience in one of your virtual classes? What are you practicing? What are you learning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We start most of our classes with sort of this exploration of internal skills. And the first thing that we talk about in almost all of our classes is intuition. And as much as people pay lip service in society to women's intuition, most of us who are socialized as women have a lot of training that tells us that we should ignore our own intuition. Like, we're out in public, someone's clearly making us uncomfortable. We're having all these feelings in our body that are suggesting to us that, like, ooh, something is off, something may be threatening. But then that training kicks in, and it's like, oh, but it would be really rude if I said something. Oh, I need to give this person the benefit of the doubt. Like, it would be just wrong of me to like be impolite. Like, I have to be X, Y, or Z, right? So we talk a lot about exploring what it feels like to listen to your own intuition. And then we talk about a number of other skills, including what we consider the most important self-defense skill, which is your voice. So as you alluded to, self-defense is not just about like somebody jumping out and physically attacking you. At Impact, we talk about self-defense in all kinds of everyday situations where people that are in your life might be crossing your boundaries. And so we practice all kinds of different verbal scenarios. And we have suited instructors who in our in-person classes wear these big padded suits with these big duct tape heads. And they play the role of the person who you might need to set a boundary with. And we have have those same instructors who are excellent actors, who are in our online classes playing the role of somebody that you can practice setting a boundary with. So we try to give folks the opportunity to practice with a little bit of adrenaline, because you may feel a little bit of adrenaline when you're actually in the real life situation. So we give folks the opportunity to practice just trying out different skills and strategies to be able to try things out before you're actually in that scary or stressful situation. The more you practice something, the easier it will be when you are, there and needing to use those skills.
You told me you fight like you train. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what that means in this situation is you're not going to be in that situation where you're startled, you're questioning what to do, you freeze, the adrenaline takes over without ever having had practice for what to do in that situation.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I guess you're giving people those situations to train so that they don't just freeze whenever something happens. And also the pandemic, boundaries part is really interesting because space negotiation has changed. There's societal factors, racial, gender, things that are coming up now. So that's extremely valuable. What is your dream or your vision for the work you do? And it could be like how society will change or how individuals will be more equipped or anything. Like, what is your bigger dream for the work?
Yeah, I think that my bigger dream for the work is that we live in a society where everyone feels empowered to use their voice. And when they use their voice, it is respected and it is heard. And I think it takes sort of like both sides. We need to practice using our voices, and we need to practice in order to give other people the opportunity to practice listening to our voices and hearing us. Because, I feel like when I was growing up, even like nobody talked to me about boundaries. Nobody talked to me about the fact that I get to say when I'm uncomfortable, or, you're doing this thing that I would really like you to stop doing. And it just gives me a sense of freedom to know that I get to set a boundary. And I want everyone to feel that freedom. And I want, everyone to do it enough that people learn to respect boundaries as well.
Yeah, that's very empowering. It sounds like maybe these are skills that every woman should have, but every person should have. So it's great to have this resource that people can learn about to come practice and pick up those skills. And on that note, if people want to get involved, either to learn more, take a class, or love the work that you're doing and want to support you, what can they do?
Yeah, we are a nonprofit, as you know, and so we appreciate any donations. If you go to our website, impactbayarea.org, you can find a link to donate. You can find a link to our various online classes that we are offering, and we are very excited to be offering our first in-person, socially distanced PPE outdoor class in April coming up for essential workers. So please go to our website, check it out, come practice with us. And yeah, I just really feel like the more people have these skills and the more people practice them, the more we normalize the fact that we all get to stand up for ourselves. So.
That's such a wonderful message. Happy International Women's Day to you. And thank you for the work you're doing for women and everybody.
Thank you so much for having us.